It's a story that's shattered our sometimes naive view of journalist ethics. The Sunday Times published articles on, among other things, a Cato Manor death squad, even printing a photo of the alleged horror of one of their so-called hits. Yesterday, the paper apologized. 6 years later, one of those deeply affected was the former KwaZulu-Natal Hawks boss, Johan Boysen. Fake news is ruining people's lives. SARS, the Hawks and others lost valuable people. The South African National Editor Forums, Adrian Basson and Sarah Findlay from Media Monitoring Africa join us now. Very good to have you both with us. Adrian, what is your response to South Africa's fake news situation? I mean, how bad are we?
Hi, Jane. Look, I think it was obviously a shock for us as journalists to see what has happened to the Sunday Times. I think it's a momentous, even historic occasion for South African journalism, a wake-up call for all of us working in the media of the perils of being misleaded by sources to serve a political faction or narrow political agenda. I do think when we talk about fake news, one must be careful to distinguish between the different forms of mis and disinformation, you know, from stories with mistakes in, of which there will still be some in future. We all make mistakes, to being misled.
What differentiates from one fake news to another? What should you look out for?
So I think if you look at the phenomenon of fake news, you know, there are websites these days who specialize in publishing completely fabricated news. And that's not what we're talking about in the Sunday Times case. In this case, it looks like dis or misinformation, where a newspaper was misled by its sources, you know, to reach a specific outcome of a story. I was also working on a competitor at the time, and you know, these stories were fed by different sources at the time. These stories about the so-called rogue unit, the so-called death squad at Cato Manor. And I think, you know, it's back to basics. It's about checking with all the people involved, getting comment, reassessing, going back to your original sources, interrogating your sources. You know, I was taught as a young journalist that the first person you investigate is your source. You know, question people on their agendas, push them on why they are coming to you with stories. So I think as South African National Editors Forum, we definitely also see an educational and a training role for us at this moment.
And we have Johan Boysen with us. Thank you for joining us. What was your response when it all came out and an apology was made?
Obviously, huge relief. I have to say, in all the interviews I've done thus far, I have to commend the current editor of Sunday Times, Bongani Sithoko, for taking this brave step.
Because it wasn't done under his watch there, was it?
Well, that's an unfortunate thing. He's now got to sort out the mess left behind by his predecessors.
Remind us what happened to you.
Well, in 2012, well, 2011, December, the article appeared. And soon after the article appeared, there was an investigation, a so-called investigation, because it became clear right from the onset who the targets in that investigations were. And within a couple of months, a number of detectives from Cato Manor were arrested, and 2 months later I was arrested with a number of the Cato Manor members as well.
I mean, okay, I want to get back to your story and the sort of impact that it had, but Sarah, I mean, I think you were reeling with everybody else in the media when this all came to light.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, as you've suggested, that the apology is a great step and a critical step, but it is fundamentally a first step. And so we support the growing calls from others in the media fraternity for a much bigger, in-depth investigation into exactly what went on, and how this whole huge plot came about, and how the Sunday Times can be so deeply entrenched in it. And we would call for the public disclosure of those findings in order to hold those accountable.
All right, so accountability obviously is really important. And you went to court, you spent millions, and yet you really battled to clear your name. So talk us about how the media and those fake news sort of supported that.
Well, imagine waking up on a Sunday morning and you've been told by the largest newspaper in the country that you were leading a death squad and that you're responsible for extrajudicial killings. I mean, I've had an unblemished police career for 35 years. I have 3 children, all adult children, professional people, and I have grandchildren. And them having to hear this day in and day out, I mean, it takes its toll on someone.
Well, what impact did it have on you, on your head and your heart and the way you operated?
Well, if it wasn't for the support of my family, and, you know, in some way also the public, because I think the public soon realized that there was more behind this story, and we received immense support from the public, from the church people. So, yeah, we managed to stay afloat in that way.
Adrian, do you think there's a naivety in the public when it comes to dealing with media? I know that, you know, Twitter has taught us a lot to be a little bit more sophisticated and discerning, but do you think that helped push the story along?
Well, Jane, I think that is why the responsibility is so huge on us as editors and journalists to get it right. The public looks to us specifically at this moment when we saw in the aftermath of Donald Trump's election, of the way that fake news and skewed algorithms were used in the referendum on Brexit, how the public was not only misled but actually influenced in the way they voted and exercised their democratic rights. Based on false information. So I do think it's a big moment for South Africa. I think we must use this moment to our advantage. Media houses with credibility and integrity must stand up, must stand forward. And I think it's also a huge moment for the public to realize that the media sometimes do make mistakes, and for us to use this as a learning lesson going forward.
We've got a caller from Cape Town. Solly, thank you for calling in. Go ahead.
I'm here.
Hello, Solly. What's your question?
Hi, Jane. Good evening, and good evening to your panel. I mean, you're having a great show. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, it's amazing that you get Adrian Passon and all of them from Senate trying to say that this is a momentous occasion. It's not a momentous occasion. The Sunday Times in the 80s, under Tertius Maiberg, defended apartheid and did the same thing. Now, once again, they've gone and destroyed lives. They've destroyed people at SARS. They've destroyed good people. And like your Mr. Boyens, they've all lost their jobs. They have no future. Until the truth comes out that who fed them the information, what was the agenda, why did they do it, and at the end come cleanly out of it. Apology is not good enough. And Senate's behavior in this, talking of being a momentous occasion. Sir, you are still in your job. You are still there. Think of all those SARS people. Think of all those people that have lost their jobs, Ivan Pillay and all of them. All good people who served this
Let's
nation.
put that to Adrian. What is your response to that?
Yes, no, I'm not differing with the caller at all. I think when I say momentous, I think that this is a big moment for the media to take lessons from this. The Sunday Times is still the biggest Sunday newspaper in South Africa, and they've done some great journalism as well. As SANEF, we will be engaging with our colleagues at the Sunday Times tomorrow. We will be having a meeting with the management of TISA Black Star to find out what they will be doing going forward. We will raise some serious concerns with them about what has now emerged, and we'll also insist that they tell us how they're going to fix this. So it's definitely not a case of whitewashing and just moving on.
Okay.
You know, other journalists in South African country has actually been reporting the other side. You know, Mr. Boysen will tell you of journalists who's been sympathetic to his case and who's reported the other side of the story. So, you know, it's also not good enough to just say that the media failed in this case.
As Solly mentioned, there were victims, lots of victims. We probably have no idea how many. Possibly you do. And tell us about some who died without possibly ever finding out that actually it was a lie.
Well, 3 of them died, and they unfortunately are not here today to experience the relief that I am experiencing. But yes, I agree with the call. It's taken a huge toll. But you know, one should not only measure this in terms of the personal toll it's taken. The toll it's taken on institutions like the National Prosecuting Authority and the Hawks especially.
And losing good people.
Losing good people. I know of at least 3 or 4 excellent advocates who resigned from the NPA as a direct result of the sordid saga. The removal of Anwar Jamat from the Hawks been replaced by someone like Bernard Clemetso, who basically eviscerated the Hawks. with these placements. So you have those two compromised institutions which are vital to the democracy being completely decimated.
Sarah, so, I mean, what should happen now? How do you bring the faith in? Obviously, you're saying, you know, investigations need to be had. What you've got to try and do is clean up the image and not have a backlash against media as well.
So I think just to touch on what you were saying as well, is that this also points to the fact that it was a far bigger political situation. It wasn't a series of stories where one or two journalists got it wrong, that this was a far greater plot. And I think our journalists have to now be so much more vigilant. This, as Adrian was saying, this is a critical moment, especially with elections coming up next year, which are dubbed to be one of the most contested yet. Journalists have to take the basic steps of check your sources, verify your facts, get multiple sides to the story, check people's agenda. They have to get back to basics.
Because the media is incredibly important. It's an incredibly important source.
Yeah, and I think also to point to what Adrian was saying earlier about avoiding the term fake news, because fake news is being used to undermine media's credibility. And when we have situations like the Sunday Times feeding into that, credibility and trust is at an all-time low when we need them the most.
Well, thank you, all three of you. It was good to talk to you. Johan Boysen, Adrian Basson, and Sarah Findlay. Thank you. That's our show for tonight. News is next.